In ancient Israel, a colossal project was underway. The Bible, in 1 Kings, chapter 5, describes it using a specific phrase: large stones and costly stones. When archaeologists examined the site of the Second Temple, built later in the same location, they found blocks weighing over 400 tons. To put that in perspective, 400 tons is the weight of 60 adult elephants. Now, imagine cutting a block that massive from a mountain without dynamite, without electric tools, without any modern technology. 80,000 men were assigned to a single, grueling task cutting stone. They toiled in quarries scattered across the mountains surrounding Jerusalem. Their day began before sunrise, with a walk to the extraction sites where they would face the most dangerous work of the entire project. You see, you don't just hit a rock until it breaks, not when precision is paramount. Each block had to fit perfectly into the temple. And there was a rule that changed everything, according to 1 Kings, chapter 6. No sound of iron tools could be heard at the construction site. This meant the stones had to arrive completely finished. Every cut, every angle, every surface had to be perfected far away from the temple itself. The technique they used was ancient, but brilliant. First, stonecutters would identify where they wanted the rock to split. They'd scratch lines into the surface using stones harder than limestone. Then, they carved small, deep holes along those lines, inserted dry wooden wedges, and poured water over them. As the wood absorbed the water, it swelled. The pressure built up slowly, and after hours, sometimes even days, the rock would split exactly where planned. No explosivos, no loud clamor of hammers striking metal chisels, just the dull, deep groan of stone breaking apart. But cutting was only the first step. Each block had to be shaped, smoothed, and measured with absolute precision. This required a different kind of worker, experienced craftsmen who could read the architect's markings. There were no detailed paper blueprints back then. Instead, instructions were engraved directly onto the stones themselves, indicating exactly where that specific block would be placed. One mistake, and the block was useless. 400 tons of stone and labor completely wasted. Work in the quarries wasn't just hard. It was deadly. Collapses were a constant threat. Poorly secured blocks could roll down the mountain, crushing anyone in their path. There was no safety equipment, no nearby hospitals. A serious injury was often a death sentence. Yet, day after day, 80,000 men returned to those mountains. Why? For the Israelites working in shifts, it was paid labor, and they had the right to return home. But for the Canaanites under forced labor, there was no choice. 1 Kings chapter 9 states that Solomon subjected them to forced labor. For them, it was cut stone or face severe punishment. But cutting the stone was only the beginning. The next stage of the project was even deadlier. How do you move 400 tons of stone across kilometers of rugged mountains without any machines? And why did so many men die trying? Imagine the scene. A rope, strained to its limit, suddenly snaps. The massive stone lurches to a halt. Men at the front are thrown to the ground. Others are trapped beneath the immense block with no hope of escape. Accidents like this weren't rare. They were a brutal, routine part of the job. The second great challenge was transport. You've cut the stone, it's perfectly shaped, and now you have to get it to Jerusalem. It weighs 400 tons. 70,000 men were assigned exclusively to this task. They didn't cut, they didn't build, they only carried. The technique they used sounds simple, but it was hell in practice. They built massive ramps of compacted earth, winding up and down the mountains. The stone was placed on thick tree trunks that served as rollers. Ropes made from plant fibers as thick as a man's arm were tied around the block. And then, the most brutal work began. Pulling. Hundreds of men gripped the ropes. A supervisor shouted rhythmic commands, ensuring everyone pulled in unison. Pull. Stop. Reposition the rollers. Pull again. The stone moved mere centimeters at a time. A single 400-ton block could take weeks to travel just 5 kilometers. During this entire time, the men slept beside the stone, ate, beside it, and never left until it reached its destination. But there was a detail that made everything worse. The ropes weren't indestructible. Plant fibers wear down under constant strain. Strands would snap, one by one, until the rope finally gave way. When it did, the weight would shift violently. Men were thrown forward, others were crushed as the stone slid backward, out of control. There was no insurance, no compensation for the families left behind. If you died, another man simply took your place on the rope. The Israelites, working in shifts, had one small mercy: 1 month of pulling stones, followed by 2 months at home. They endured because they knew relief was coming. But the Canaanites in forced labor had no such hope. They pulled for 7 long years until the project was finished. Many didn't survive the first few months, succumbing to exhaustion, injuries, or diseases from sleeping in the open. The mortality rate among the carriers was the highest of the entire project, and still, the work never stopped. Solomon had deadlines to meet. Here's the astonishing part. When a stone finally arrived at the construction site in Jerusalem, it could not be touched. Remember the rule? No sound of iron tools. This meant the placement had to be perfect on the first try. If a block was off by even a finger's width, you couldn't just tap it into place with a hammer. You'd have to pull it back, reposition the rollers, and try all over again. This is why the supervisors were relentless. They measured every angle, and if anything was wrong, the carriers were blamed.